taking an unconventional look at stocks, property, bonds, economics, and more. This is the Total Money Management Podcast with Steve Moriarty, Tom Hill, and Jacob Senior.
Welcome to the Total Money Management Podcast. We're going to be going through the week that was August 26 to 30. How are we going, gentlemen?
It's getting into summer, isn't it?
Sometimes.
Well, what, 2 days last week?
Mate, the first 2 days I'm already complaining.
Yeah.
That's because you're British.
So hot.
Well, it went from being nice and cold to like 38 degrees in about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
It's gone back to normal now.
Yeah.
Like it's about 12 or 13 at night, which is pleasant.
The new normal.
The new normal. But it was bloody hot last week. There was 2 days last week where it was a shocker.
Yeah. Anyway, the weather is over. Let's talk
this
about
is now the weather
That's it.
podcast.
That's your weather forecast.
what we got today.
That's the only prediction you'll get on this podcast. Hint, hint.
Well, we're going to be saying happy birthday to the old man. Not you,
Not
Stephen.
Steve. Hey.
We are funny. Uncle,
You worked that one out beforehand between you boys?
we did think about it.
I wish.
Uncle Warren turned 94. He's a pretty good investor.
Not sure if you heard of him.
Yeah, you probably should have. We're going to be going through relativity, immigration numbers, inflation, focus on bears, and an investment boom.
There you go.
Well, the immigration numbers I'm particularly interested in having a chat about because that's every second comment on the socials at the moment is the only reason property's going up is immigration, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah.
The only reason the economy is surviving is because of immigration.
And the Olympics.
Yes. Well, what about Warren? So
Boom. Well done, Tom.
So Warren's 94. He's moved a lot of his assets into cash now.
Yes, he's selling more Bank of America. Going down. I mean, it's just astounding. I just can't. I think I raved about it last week. I'm not sure, but
Probably.
God, yeah, thanks for that. Not 89. Like he was interested in money at like 5 or 6, right? So you think that's 89 years that he's been thinking about money? God, no wonder he's got a shitload of it.
But he still lives on...
You couldn't be a failure at 94, could you? You couldn't say, oh, look, I've struggled I just mistimed the market all the time over the last 90 years.
I saw something so funny on the socials where his wife was complaining about a $4 coffee. 'Cause
Yes.
It's too expensive. And obviously he's getting berated. But it's like this is probably why he's done so well because he's always looking at... He's just looking at all the numbers.
Everything's
all the time.
value.
Everything, yeah.
Everything's value. But as we argue, it's about your personality, right? Because I've got friends who have got loads of money, but they are still tight-fisted. It's like, you should buy these at Aldi. And it's like, really? Why? There's like a 50-cent difference. But that's the way people think about money, right? Some people are like, don't care about it. Some people are like, I really, count every cent. Other people like me do weird things where I go, it's outrageous. I'm buying the cheapest toothpaste possible because it's all just toothpaste. But then if it comes to a shirt, I'll go, oh, Hugo Boss shirt for $300. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and I want to drive a BMW.
That's exactly right. But that's what I mean. It's preferences, right?
But it's either falling out and that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not the latest BMW either.
It was at the time,
Yeah.
though.
Anyway,
Moving right
issue.
along.
Let's talk about the big issue this week. So, most weeks you can read the news, and there's obviously bullish and bearish mobs going on, and that's if you want to find anywhere with a bit of hate, go to TMM Instagram and you'll or TikTok, and you'll find some very funny conversations there between us and the people. But it's a pretty safe bet to know markets rise over the long term. But does it pay to be a bear from time to time?
My argument is yes.
yeah. I also think it's important to kind of underscore, like, it may sound like we're perma bears because I feel like for the last 50 weeks we've had a underlying tone of caution, but that's just particular markets. Like, we're mindful of overall valuations, but it's not saying we're not investing still. It's just being mindful of it.
Yeah, it's just in a bull market, you get a bit. It's the same with a company. You start a company, right? And you work hard and you save every, inch of block of wood that you cut and you try to use it somewhere, right? Then once you start making money, you start to get a little bit more like, I'll lease the Mercedes. Of course I can. Things are going really well. So then you lease the Mercedes, right? And then you lease one for the missus. Oh, she better get a Mercedes too. And then we get the kids into private school and suddenly you've created this structure or lifestyle that costs you an absolute bloody mozza. But it's all right. And you don't go, oh, maybe we should cut back because you're doing really well, right, in your business or in your stocks or in your property, right? And so, but then it rolls over, and that's where it becomes a problem. And so that's what we're sort of saying with market cycles. You can't. It's stupid to be permanently bullish or permanently bearish. All you can do is look at the valuation and go, okay, things are really expensive. I know they roll over. Okay, I should be prudent.
Yeah.
But when oil was, $0 a barrel, we were saying to people, buy oil, right? Now, we weren't permanently bearish then because it was good value.
Yeah. I think what people fail to realise most of the time is that they're a product of their environment. So if you grow up in a really frugal household, for example, you're going to be naturally quite frugal as an adult. And if you've grown up through a 20-year macro bull market in property, you're going to think that property only goes up.
Yeah,
But it's the
exactly.
same in stocks. It's the same in the US with the S&P 500.
Yep.
If you've grown up in that environment where you've only ever seen it go up and it's compounded at bloody whatever it has,
13, 14% for 15 years.
a year, then you're going to go, well, it's never going to go down. And it all fits into your personality. It's not one aspect of it. It's your environment and your personality equals your mindset.
Yep. It's the experience that you have lived, and that's why I say to people, I've seen market cycles because I'm 61, right? So I've seen this before. I've felt it. I've read the headlines, right? I've lived a bubble. I've lost money in a bubble. I've made money in property only because I'm old, whereas you guys haven't operated in 3 market cycles, right? And that's why it's really hard to say to people who, your age or younger, who say, stocks are only ever going to go up, property's only ever going to go up. What I'm saying is, no, guys, I've lived through those eras where you think it's only ever going to go up, right? And someone said on the socials this week, i.e., property only ever goes up. And I said, that's exactly what you hear at the top.
Well, that's the other thing, right? Us humans are stubborn creatures and often don't kind of go, why are we so firm? Or why are we so firm on our belief that, property only goes up? Like, why are we going to question that?
Because we have egos.
Exactly. And then, any little bit of evidence we have that supports that belief, we're going to take that as validation.
Absolutely. Well, especially when you're right.
Yeah.
You've been, anyone who's property's boom from 2000, right, has been a steady, absolutely smashing investment.
Yeah.
Along comes some old guy and says, oh, mate, you should be prudent with property. People go, what are you talking about, you old bastard? Things are going great. 25 years, I've made a mozza.
But if you're thinking, maybe property's a bad idea right now, you're going to see articles and they're the ones that are going to stand out to you that support that belief. And go, some other people see this too.
Confirmation bias.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're permanently bullish on property, you're going to read the headlines around Olympics are coming, we're going to invest in infrastructure. They're both true, but we're going to go, oh, yeah.
And we're still going to sit here and go,
right.
what's the yield?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. If you're looking at the data, it doesn't matter what you think.
Yeah.
What's it going to deliver over the next
Who
decade?
gives a shit about the yield when you can make 250 grand, in a year or something?
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, happy birthday, old man.
Yes.
Well done,
94.
I hope he makes
He's
it to
done
100.
well.
He's done very well.
You hope he makes it to what?
To 100.
Just 100?
Well, and
You don't want him
Bit
to
of
get
it.
to
not
105?
Under a 5.
Bit dark, mate.
Yeah, sorry.
Imagine if he died without a will. Oh, wouldn't that be?
I can't say that I probably wouldn't have thought about that.
I haven't. Yeah, I don't have anything for that, mate.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I've just thrown it out there.
What's this?
Anyway, if you guys want to move along, move along.
Moving along. Talk about death. What's this, Steve? We've got a photo up.
I don't know. I haven't got my glasses on. Hang on. Here I have.
Age 11.
But, what I'm.
Oh, this is Buffett. Hey?
I'm doing 2 things. there's a Buffett quote there. The best investment you can make is an investment for yourself. The more you learn, the more you'll earn.
Yep.
I'm just pointing that out that, if you're interested in money, you've got to learn about investing, whether it's stocks, property, bonds, rare art, whatever it is, right? But that photo up there, what I'm showing is even Buffett lost money, right? And 95% of beginning investors lose money. And the reason why is because you don't know what you're doing, right? But if you get lucky enough to make money, you seldom sit down and go, you know what, I'm going to nut through why I made money. You're going to think you're a bloody genius. That's all you want to talk about, right? Because you made money. It's only when you lose money that it prompts you to think about it. There was a really good tweet on X or on Twitter from Meb Faber this morning, and it said, there are, oh God, I'm going to stuff it up. You can be, with every investment, you get wise or you make money, but you don't get both, right? And so what he's saying is you only get wise when you lose money, because that's the trigger for you to go, oh, geez, I wonder why I lost money. Then you'll go and start asking questions, right? No one ever says, I made a bucket load of money. Geez, I'll just investigate that. All you do is you double up, right? I made money in junior penny stocks. Right, I'm going to buy more junior penny stocks. Then you lose the seat out of your pants. Then you start thinking about what went on.
Well, that's what I did.
I didn't want to mention names.
Again and again.
Again, I'm very wise now, though.
Yeah.
You win or you learn.
Absolutely.
You just 40 grand poorer.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, once you blokes get to 94, you'll have $108 zillion between you.
$108.
I hope so.
Right?
Look, Monday, the headline for us being biggest mistakes in investing is looking at the price and thinking that it represents the value of the asset.
Yes.
So we've got a snippet there, and the figures show it was easier to manage a mortgage when the interest rates were higher. I know there's a lot of arguments on social medias going, why are you complaining about a 6% interest rate? Back in the 80s, we had to deal with almost 20% interest rate. And if you look at it, the average income, $19,000 at the time, average mortgage, $64,000 at the time. Yep, interest rate was almost 19%. But the debt service ratio was 41%.
Yeah, and that was, interest rates were at 18, which is A, a little bit unusual, but B, look at it, that's 3 times income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, the mortgage is 3 times income. In Sydney, it's 13.5.
Which is why one parent could support a family in the 80s, while now, it's not uncommon.
You need 4 parents to support a family. Is that average or median?
You need to be Italian, where you have grandma upstairs, you in the middle, and the kids down on the bottom.
all at work. Whereas,
building houses, mate, building houses.
2024, average income 79, mortgage 750, interest rate 6%, debt service ratio almost 70%. So
it's all relative, and it's wages. It's the wages question, right?
Yeah. It's what we're going to talk about with our how do you say it, Jacob? With a gob full of coffee.
Got a mouthful of coffee.
A masterclass.
A masterclass. We're going to have a masterclass coming up on stocks versus property, which we'll delve deeper into that conundrum about which one is best.
Yeah, stay tuned for that. Tuesday, there must be an election approaching. We haven't talked about the US for a bit. Might be time to chat about where we're at.
Been at least a week. Or China. We haven't mentioned them.
So budget deficits pushing money into the economy, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And now cuts to student immigration, which will just impact the job market as well. So there's... What do you reckon? What do you think the election is going to bring?
Well, there's an ABC News headline. Education Minister Jason Clare has announced his much anticipated overall limit for international students starting in 2025 with individual caps.
Which happens to be an
due to be set. Why is that?
Why is what?
Why are they doing
Why do we have elections?
Why is that important?
Because there's a whole industry now that operates on servicing international students, right? There's the visa people, right? You want to study in Australia, I'll get you a visa, I'll organise everything.
It's a cash cow as well.
And absolutely. So they're the interests where I say, oh, Tom, you know how we've got 400,000 students a year. Well, now we're going to have 270. You go, well, hang on, that's less money for me, right? So they're screaming. Universities, oh, my God, the world's going to collapse because we haven't got foreign students, right? Everybody does the same thing when the government says we're going to stop spending money on X, right? All the industries go, oh, my God, it'll be the end of the world. Of course, it never is. But the point being, the problem, what I'm seeing globally is immigration is becoming a really, really serious issue, right? And I mean this in all seriousness. We're going to have to be really careful because what I'm seeing in Europe, in America, you know, Donald Trump just talks incessantly about the border, right? Illegal immigrants are coming in and they're raping your children and killing your children. It's like, Donald, right? But this is what's going on. In England, you've got the same thing. In Ireland, you've got the same thing. Right? And it comes from economic pressure, right? So it comes at the moment where people in Australia are saying, listen, house prices are through the roof. We can't get rentals, and yet we've got 550,000 temporary students rolling into the joint. And to make matters worse, they're not even learning anything. It's just bullshit because they're allowed to work. So what you're doing is building resentment, right, with the local population. And as I say, I'm just old enough to have seen this before, right? And this is the cycle. And so the government is now saying, listen, this has been a bit of an issue. We need to start dialing it back.
Well, I haven't seen governments divide populations as much as recently. It seems to be that both sides of the government is just that far right and left that it's dividing populations more than ever.
Yeah,
in America, it's been that way forever.
Look, it's a really tricky issue because as soon as you talk about immigration, everyone takes a side. As soon as you start talking about immigration, you're either a raving racist, right, or you're a snowflake lefty who wants, you know, every man and his dog to roll into Australia for free.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. As soon as you start, if you want to talk sensibly, then it's really hard to do because what you do is you hear from the, quote, racists, or you hear from, quote, the snowflakes. And so you don't hear the middle ground. And then on one side, you've got people who are advocating to cut immigration because of house prices, you know, that stuff. On the other side, you've got the university sector. And as I said, Tom, all that industry going, no, don't cut student numbers. And you've got businesses going, oh, for God's sake, no, don't cut student numbers because I'll have to pay more wages or train more people. So you've got all these sides that are butting heads about it, and the government's got to come up with something in the middle
to appease everyone.
To sort of appease everybody. That's why I think we talked a couple of weeks ago where I said, you know, the landlords are unhappy, right? And the renters are unhappy. So generally everybody's unhappy. Right, because the renters are saying rent prices are through the roof, and the landlords are saying bloody interest rates are killing me. So how do you make affordable housing? Well, you make it cheaper. Well, not according to the landlords; they don't want cheaper housing, but the renters do because then the rent will be better.
Or you have state-built government housing, which no one wants to live in or buy.
Well, yeah, but the governments don't want to build it. Right, like I said, in my day, they used to build social housing for poor people. Well, they don't do that anymore. Right, and that's part of the problem.
Why don't they do it?
Because it costs money, and in the 80s we went through that era, and it started with Thatcher, right? Which was, well, the government should get out of the market and let the markets operate, right? So you know, look at Thames Water.
Yeah,
I mean, God, what a shit show! Pollution. You know, they're now bankrupt after like 17 years of something of privatisation. Right, and yet the English government is steadfastly refusing to nationalise it. I mean, it's bloody water, for God's sake.
Yeah.
But they've done it with electricity, they've done it with trains. All of those things were said, no. What we'll do is we'll incentivise people to own property and rent it to poor people. Right? But when there's not enough property, what do landlords do? They jack up the rent.
Hike the rent, yeah.
Right? Because somebody's got to manage to pay it.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. Right? And what we're seeing is more and more is fewer people owning more property, multiple properties, right? And that's where you're getting more and more inequality.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to see this getting better without it getting worse first.
Well, this is, I think you said it last week, Tom, or the week before, what happens? And it's like, well, it gets messy, it might break down, but essentially government will have to come up with some sort of solution. And I think the way they do it is, there's an old political saying, never waste a crisis, right? So what do? Well, you wait for the GFC, shit hits the fan and the government says, right, now we can start to rearrange things, right? Because everything's terrible. That's where the government gets an opportunity to say, righto, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build XYZ.
We'll save the day.
Right?
Right?
Well, you saw that in COVID as well, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone got a free
Absolutely.
kick. Let's talk about inflation numbers. They're a bit boring, so they fell at 3.5%. What we've really been waiting for is whether the RBA will drop rates, which they haven't now. I think the other day they came out saying it was going to be the same for a bit longer. We're not quite dropping them yet.
Yep.
Which we kind of expected anyway. But inflation at 3.5% doesn't really mean much in July.
I think I'm going to skip ahead a week, but Michelle Bullock came out. What day are we, gents? September the whatever, 6th or 7th. We're recording this, and Michelle Bullock came out on the 5th or the 6th, whatever it is, and said, some people will just have to sell their houses, may have to sell their houses. I mean,
I didn't say
Jesus.
that.
Yeah. Oh, Tom, mate, look, I'm sorry that you're struggling. Well, why don't you just sell your house?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry you're really sick. You just have to cut your arm off.
Yeah.
That's it. Then you'll be all right.
Then you'll be better. Like that. I mean, you can obviously...
Tells it how it is, though.
Well, I think you can see there's an absolutely big argument going on between the Reserve Bank, which is saying we want to crush inflation, i.e., saying to Jim Chalmers, stop subsidising people's energy bills and stuff because it's contributing to inflation. Chalmers, the politician, is saying, well, yeah, and if we do that, electricity goes through the bloody roof and people vote us out. So, do you see what I mean? Like, I can tell you, mate, from being in politics, in Treasury and in the RBA, you can imagine the briefing notes crossing the table, right? They would be curt. They would be hidden with messages of, we hate you as much as you hate us, right? Look, I'm telling you, that's what's going on. But I think it's really tone deaf of her to come out and say, some people will just have to sell their house. Well, it's all right for you, Miss Smarty Pants, on $1 million a year with 4 investment properties. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can imagine if Anthony Albanese came out and said, well, look, shit, people will just
save more money, mate.
People will just have to sell their houses. Joe Hockey did it in, I think, 2015 when they said something about, wages or something, and Joe went, well, just go and get a better job. People were bloody outraged because he was photographed sitting out the back of Parliament with Matthias Cormann smoking a big fat cigar with a glass of wine. I mean, do you know what I mean?
Just save some more, mate.
You look at the imagery there and just go, I'm not voting for that dude.
Yeah.
Right?
They're so out of touch, but all governments are, I think. Vote green.
Yeah. Wow.
Not really.
Righto, don't get me started.
Funny as. Thursday, just a reminder that actually there's been a lot of people reach out recently saying, oh, love the podcast or whatever, or hate the podcast.
We just delete those comments.
We just delete them. What do you guys actually do? And I'm like, that's a good point, actually. How do you help people? Like, it's all on the website. We teach people short, medium, long-term strategies on wealth building, mainly around stocks and ETFs. So if you're interested, check it out. I'm not going to plug any more. But we focus using 8 principles, and one of them is not losing money. Just to make sure that we we drill that one home, not speculative. And the chart that's up here, we've looked at US stocks, which have spent most of their time in a bull market, but then the bear periods within that are very destructive to your long-term yield.
Yes.
And ties into the story of time timing the market and not time in the market,
Yep.
which we talk about a little bit. But there's times like in 2019, which was a black swan event, where there's a huge downfall and then an almost immediate correction. And it ties into the CAPE ratio as well, which we've talked about a lot. So
100%. That was a very unusual time with that V-shaped recovery.
yeah.
People who bought the bottom, which I remember Steve doing and me going, I'm not touching that. It's just been free falling. Would have done very well. But like, you know, just go look at a chart, like even the ASX 200, right? And it just comes back to the point, it's about when you buy. Like that's the main thing.
Yep.
If you were unlucky enough to go all in on, you know, in 2007, for example, your stocks would have been in the red until 2021, right? So it's, you know, while it's very fair to say that most of the time the markets go up, it's also important when you buy
Yeah.
It's the
or where you buy.
Again, it's and we see this on the socials, right? Property only ever goes up. Well, yes, but does that mean you made money out of it? Well, it depends when you buy, right? And so it's the difference we're going to talk about between an individual. A general statement is this: property markets only ever rise. Okay, that's a broad statement that encompasses 5 million properties in Australia.
You could make that same broad statement with stocks.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, does that apply to every single house in Australia? No, it doesn't. That's my point. When you get lazy and say, mate, stocks just go up, it's like, no. Not every stock goes up, right? And if you're holding the stock that goes down, well, you're not sitting there going, oh, well, it's okay because stocks only go up. Do you see what I mean? It's the difference between the index and a single stock, right? And that's what we talk about in the risk hierarchy. You can get rich buying a single stock, like you can get rich buying a single house, but you can also lose a lot of money buying a single house or buying a single stock. But you can get wealthy over time if you buy the stock index, right? Because what you're doing is buying a little piece of 300 of the ASX, right? The ASX 300. You're buying a little piece of every one of those companies. Some will rise, some will fall, some will go bankrupt, some will go gangbusters, and you get, quote unquote, the average. But if you buy one of those stocks, it doesn't mean you get, quote, the average, because they're not the same thing.
Yeah, you might buy one of the ones that get busted.
Absolutely. Or you might buy one of the ones that goes up, 9,000%.
Well, the odds of you buying a busted one is higher than
Absolutely.
buying one that goes up.
Yeah.
For stocks.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, but yeah, if you look at it on a chart over 100 years, you go, well, look at this, it goes up.
That's exactly right.
Which is the argument for people that aren't too educated, to be honest.
Well, it's the newbies that, again, when you're in a bull market, the people who get attracted to bull markets in the end are the beginners, right? They're the ones where the stock market rises 250%. It's been going gangbusters for 10 years. Then they think they should get into stocks, right? Because their neighbours are in stocks and they're making a lot of money and, why can't we do it? I'm smarter than Tom, and away they go. But they don't realise that they're buying at the top, right? Tom was smart enough to get in 10 years ago when it was cheap.
Or lucky enough.
Well, or lucky enough.
Which is often the case. But then there's this argument of invest early and invest regularly and forget and don't look at it until you turn 60. Which is...
If you're going to dollar cost average and keep feeding money in, like that works, but it can work better.
Yeah.
If you also understand
optimize
valuation.
it.
Yeah.
Why would, in my mind, why would you not pay attention
to the value?
Yeah. I mean, this is what you hear from the finance industry all the time. Oh, just keep buying, $500 a month or $100 a month or whatever. Right? And my argument is, okay, so if it's batshit crazy and it's way overpriced and I'm going to offer 0.5% yield, I should just keep buying. Yeah, because in 20 years it'll be worth more. Oh, okay. But shouldn't I wait for it to offer 8%, save up my cash, and then instead of putting $100 in a month for 12 months, when it crashes at the end of 12 months, I put in $1,200?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting a yield of 8% and the market's really cheap and everybody hates it. Exactly. That to me is pure logic where I go, yeah, okay, that sounds
Well,
reasonable.
that's what the really, really good fund managers do. That's what Buffett does.
Of course.
Like that. Why wouldn't you?
But it's
take
just so
the
bloody
leaf out?
obvious, isn't
Well, apparently not.
it? Okay.
CapEx is doing really well though in the US. Like, so the US having a huge investment boom, and that's coming from the whole turbulence around war and fighting, and they're bringing everything on shore again.
They're
Which
actually
is
investing.
they're investing in their own economy, which is brilliant, obviously for the economy. Which is what confuses my tiny little pea brain with how can we talk about a recession if the economy's going really well?
Because they think government spending equals a recession.
They being
Because
who is
they
that?
being the ideologues who think that government is bad, whatever they do, right? And it's a long story, and it's tied to, as I say, ideology. So the ideology is, or the theory is, oh well, governments spend too much money, then they've got to tax people, and that'll cause a recession because there'll be less money. The truth is, the government spends a lot of money. The private sector says, geez, we're going to get in on this. We're going to spend some money as well. And suddenly the place is going gangbusters, right? So that's what you've got going on in the US, because they've got an investment boom from Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. So now America is booming in investment. So the government says to TSMC, listen, we want you out of Taiwan. We want you to build factories here as well. TSMC says, oh, geez, I don't know about that. Biden says he's $10 billion, and they go, okay, we're in. So they spend $50 billion.
I would have done it for 9, by the way.
Well, there you go. Well, that's how they do it. But what I'm saying is, in that sense, the government has spent $10 billion, but TSMC has now just committed 40, right, or 50 to build a factory.
Yep.
Now, 6 months ago, there were people on X, all these wise experts going, oh, the American chips are shithouse. They're not as good as Taiwan. They just done an audit where the American production chips are now equaling, not perfectly, but are just as good as what, I shouldn't say just as good. They're nearly as good as what is being produced in Taiwan. Right? So what I'm saying is, again, what we talked about at the front, there's all this ideology, and what you said, Tom, oh, the economy's really terrible. Why? Because I'm reading all those articles that say the economy's really terrible because I think it should be really terrible. Right? And that's why I say US growth is 3% of GDP. 3% economic growth. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant.
Right?
When you compare it to like Australia, which is...
Yeah, our
Jesus.
spending's gone backwards.
Yeah.
And we've just been revised down now from 1.1, I think our economic growth rate was, which is terrible, now to 0.9. Why? Because the government's not spending any dosh. Right? Is that you, Tommy?
Well, the opposite's true with with the capex in Australia, where it's rolled over 2.2% in the June quarter, and there's just no spending anywhere.
Well, there's not in Australia, and there's not in China, and there's not in Europe. And this is, again, why the US carries the world.
Yeah.
Because they're out there spending a lot of money, and they're a really big, rich country.
Yeah.
And China looks at it and says, well, why should we spend a lot of money when they're spending money, and we'll just send them our EVs? And that's why it's changing now, because the Americans are saying, we're going to start building our own EVs and our own semiconductors. Right?
Yep.
So we're at the pointy end of the stick.
We are. We're in the bonus section.
Bonus section.
The Bloomberg section.
The Bloomberg. This is a short story, but the bonus section is the highlighted in the 4 C's. Conflict is obviously good for business. I think everyone kind of knows that. It's good for certain sectors.
Absolutely.
And conflict is not stopping.
Killing works. Okay, next.
Next, short story. Canada is now imposing 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs and 25% on steel and aluminium, or aluminum if you're a US listener, to protect domestic manufacturers. So we've been talking about this for a while. We won't spend much time on it, but that's a huge tariff.
Yep. You want my
Next.
prediction? EVs are dead in the water. There you go. It's hybrids.
All right. Well, maybe we'll do something on that.
Well,
later.
how do you keep Chinese EVs out of America?
You tariff them.
Nah, you just tell people they're shit. Well, you do. You say to people, we're not going to build any charging stations, right? But you could buy a Ford Bronco hybrid, and that way you'll never run out of charge on the highway. You'll always have petrol as the backup. I mean, to be quite honest, I reckon it makes eminent sense. They did a study in Norway, right? Because everyone's like, oh, Norway's got all these EVs. Oh, my God, that's really cool, right? You know what they find out? The EV in Norway is the second car, right? And what the Norwegians said was, look, if I want to run around the city, no worries, I'll use the EV. But if I want to drive to my second place, which is in the country, I use the petrol car because they're worried about range anxiety, right? And if you run out, it's not like petrol where you pull over, slip in $50 and go, beauty, now I'm on the road again within 5 minutes, right? You've got to sit there and charge it, and it might take, 2 hours but put it this way, what you do is you go, even if charging was an hour, you'd be going, oh man, I can fill my car up in 5 minutes, right? You've got something to compare it against.
Cheeky Norwegians. Well, we've actually got one Norwegian listener who wrote to us. So if you're listening to this one, can you verify Steve's facts for us, please, for next time?
It's called the Norwegian. It's called the Norwegian illusion, I think. Google that one.
Right.
There you go. So,
Right, is that the end?
I think so. We've got
Ciao.
We've got
Ciao.
We've got the chow. Tom, do you want to run us through that?
yeah, it's one of those year-to-date charts that are kind of just showing the different performances of different sectors and indexes. We've kind of underscored natural gas. A lot of things have performed pretty well if we look at year-to-date, except for natural gas.
Shocker.
It's down almost 35% year-to-date. So
Well, let's buy some of that.
let's go have a look at it.
Why not?
Yeah,
Why not?
that's where I'm looking. Anyway,
Is that the wrap up?
that's the wrap, and it's not financial advice.
Obviously not. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Good to see you both.
Good one, gentlemen. See you next week.
See you next
then.
week. Cheers.
Stay up to date on our socials. Just search for Total Money Management on Instagram and TikTok. For your free investor personality assessment, go to totalmoneymanagement.com.au. And as always, remember, we don't provide financial advice.